having adventures and come to Haiti. So we had just finished a long and very tiring week, and I was leaving a day early because I was determined to get back to my daughter, who was going to school up in Rochester. It was her senior year. It was parents' weekend. I really did not want to miss her senior year parents' weekend. And RIT always had great parents' weekends, and Al Pacino was the guest speaker, and I love Al Pacino. So I certainly did not want to miss that.
Say hello to Al.
Yeah.
If you're out there, Al.
So I left a day early. Kelly puts me on the Island Impact truck with about 3 or 4 guys to go with me as escorts, and it had been raining every night. The roads were impassable. They were rutted, there were holes, it was just incredibly crowded. We made no headway. The drivers kept trying to find different ways around, and they just couldn't do it. And then Pastor Kazmi, I do not speak Creole. I speak bad Spanish. Pastor Kazmi speaks no English and also bad Spanish. And he said something to me that I thought he was asking me about would I do something, and I was trying to be helpful. I went, yeah, see, Pastor, sure. I always just wanted to be helpful and not be a burden on anybody. And he jumped out of the cab of the truck, ran ahead. Luckily, I was only traveling with a backpack. He comes back, grabs my backpack, and says, come with me. And one of the people that we work with, Lulu, came with us. We jogged up ahead through the traffic, and he introduced me to a gentleman, and unfortunately I don't remember his name because I was a little overwhelmed. Indicated I should get on the motorcycle behind him. Lulu got behind me. I looked around, and it dawned on me, oh, that's what he asked. I have never ridden a motorcycle, on the back of a motorcycle, and we took off for Port-au-Prince, 20-minute hair-raising ride through Port-au-Prince between bumper-to-bumper traffic, people on the road. He was taking his elbows and pushing the side view mirrors of the cars around us away. I was trying desperately to keep my knees in. I thought I'm going to lose a kneecap. Honked his horn the whole way, and we finally arrived, with the wheels on fire at the airport. I got off. I'm still vibrating from this motorcycle, wiping the dust off my face. They're shoving my backpack at me, and my plane was 2 hours delayed. But I finally got on a plane, flew from Port-au-Prince to Miami, from Miami to JFK, from JFK to Buffalo, and then my husband and my daughter picked us up in Buffalo. We went to the airport, and then the next day got to see Al.
Yeah. Was he good?
He was wonderful. He was wonderful. But, I was standing there at the RIT listening to Al Pacino speak and thinking, and yesterday I was racing through the streets of Port-au-Prince on a motorcycle. And I have you to thank. Thank you.
You're welcome. Your first ride on the motorcycle.
I have stories to tell, all thanks to you.
Don't you think it's funny, though? It's like, I think as Americans, we would say the road's impassable.
Yeah.
We can't go to the airport today. But, it just says something about who the Haitians are.
Right.
That despite the difficulty and the challenges that they meet, they're going to get to the airport.
They're going to get to the airport, yeah.
Says something about that spirit.
Yeah.
Very strong spirit.
How do you feel about the kids and the school and what were you doing here in the orphanage? Like, how do you think it's impacting the kids?
How can it not impact the kids, what Kelly and Rob and the other teams have done beforehand? I had heard about it, right? I remember hearing when you first found the orphanage last year after the earthquake. Do you want to talk about that trip? Or?
Yeah, that's okay. Go ahead.
I wasn't here for when you found it, but I remember hearing about it and how devastating it was to find these handicapped orphans and handicapped adults just sleeping. They couldn't sleep in the building anymore and just sleeping out. And it had been months.
Months.
And
they didn't have beds.
No
what
beds.
They had done was they had put out pieces, they had put out concrete blocks, and then they put pieces of, it wasn't even wood, it was press board, which kind of sinks, and they put sheets on top of that, and that's what they were sleeping on inside the tents.
And a lot of these residents here are severely handicapped.
Right. They're contractures.
Yep.
They've never been cared for. They've never had anything until the earthquake,
So after hearing that, I was impressed when I got here, and there were the tents and these great bunk beds with mattresses that were built.
Church at the Movies built those.
And benches for them to eat at and go to school at, and they'd done a lot. So and there's still much, much more to do.
That's right. There's a lot.
When I first came, I knew this was an orphanage, but I noticed that most of them are handicapped. It's just so it's interesting that not only are they homeless, but they also have a handicap to go along with it.
Pastor Francois and his wife, are handicapped as well. You know what is amazing too is that one of the residents, I love to talk about him. His name is Tiquin, which means like little corner, and basically what it means is he got put in the corner. You know what I mean? Left in the corner. And in Haiti, they often don't name the kids for a while until they live. They say that most of the children are going to die under the age of 2, so they wait until they're at least 2 to 3, and they go get a baptismal record. They don't get them a birth certificate. And after they've lived 2 years, they'll go give them a name. And so until then, they have a nickname they call them. Sometimes it's little coconut, sometimes it's little flower, or little tea mademoiselle, little lady. But then they end up, calling him Little Corner, meaning that that's where he spent his time because he was handicapped and couldn't do anything.
Now that you bring that up, you hear a lot of the biblical names and the meaning of each of them.
Well, all names have meanings. I mean, if you think about it, some means strong. Jehoshaphat was a song leader, and that, So different names have different, significance, but that's what they do. They call them the name that they're reminded. I remember when I first came to Haiti, there was a little blind boy that was mentally retired, and they called him Ticabri. And when I first came to Haiti, one of the first sights I saw in the village was Ticabri tied to the coconut tree because he would throw himself into the fire. And they tied him to the coconut tree, and I can remember being so upset and yelling at the parents, why would you tie this boy to the tree? But it was the only way they could keep him from throwing himself into the fire. He wasn't socialized at all. And, that was one of the mission things we did. We took upon ourselves to teach him, to socialize him, to love him, and get him to the point that we finally got him in school. And not much did he learn, but at least he stopped throwing himself in the fire, and he didn't have to be tied to a tree, So they're, most handicapped children don't make it. And if they do make it, like Francois had the problem, particularly after the earthquake, parents of handicapped people were killed. And we're not talking about just young children. We're talking about adult handicapped people.
Right.
Tiquin is in his 20s now. And the families just came up and said, oh, can you keep him for a while? And they dropped him off and left and abandoned them. So he's inherited more handicapped people, which requires, people to come and help take care of those people. They have to be fed and bathed and dressed. And he has a school up there. And I think if you go up in the school, you probably have pictures up there of the kids sitting in the school, which is really kind of nice. All those handicapped kids they put their uniforms on every day and go to school. It's the best thing they could do for them, Wonderful. They're wonderful, very loving, very kind. They're responsive too. If you touch them, they hug you, which tells me that they're receiving a lot of love here. Children who are abused don't respond that way to you.
No, they don't reciprocate.
Yeah.
So you and Rob met on the missions field.
Yeah, we did.
So, which is interesting because you see how you both of you live, and it's you look at it, it's maybe pretty hard or difficult, for two people just to make a decision to come and live out in the field like that.
Right.
But you actually met on the field, so it was a passion that both of you had before you became a couple.
Right, and we've carried that through now for, I hate to say it, 25 years. I'm getting old, but we've been involved in Haiti for 25 years, Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and even when we haven't lived here, we've still been involved in some way.
How many years was it before the earthquake that you had been to Haiti?
I hadn't been to Haiti in 15 years before the earthquake. And my husband had, because my children were little, so he would make a trip here and there. But I didn't because I had small children.
Well, the reason I asked you was when we went to Léogâne, when we came right after the earthquake,
yeah.
We went out to Léogâne and you weren't sure we could get there.
That was where Rob and I used to live. That's where we had our mission.
We arrived on the truck and one woman spotted you and then started yelling, Madame Bob is back.
Yeah.
Madame Bob.
They
Madame
recognized
Bob.
me.
They recognized you after 15 years. And what struck me the most, besides that they recognized you after all those years, meaning you were there and you impacted them, was your compound that you had built still had the fresh water for them. The building was still standing compared to the rest of the town
Right.
that you had built.